I request Anil ji to launch the discussion series and also the school climate report with which we are starting the discussion series. So Anil ji, please go ahead and do the honors.
Display this wonderful report to the audience here. Right. I had the occasion, because having opened it, I had the occasion to browse through it. And I'll touch upon some of the points that have been raised in this wonderful report that is here. Good morning, everyone, again. And what a pleasure it is to be amidst my ex-colleagues. And I'm told there are 4 aspects that are going to be looked at. One is the social and emotional skills. Second is positive attitude. Supportive school climate, that is the report that I have released today. And the academic knowledge of students. Of course, I'm not so concerned about the last part, but the first 3 parts are really, really important. And I hope we understand very clearly. Now, what I understood from going through some of the report that I read this morning was, it is not focusing so much on the why part of it, because I think it's an understood fact. The National Education Policy also emphasizes the need for cognitive and effective skills. They say that mere academic learning does not make a student successful later in life. Even as a student, if he has to succeed, he has to focus on certain other aspects, on holistic learning, on the development of the character of the individual and in its entirety. And that does not come merely by learning from 2 + 2 = 4. There is much more to life and education and learning beyond merely learning, reading and writing and calculating. So I think that's the focus of this study. And I'm so glad they have taken this step. So as I said earlier, the why part has not been so elaborately discussed in the report, because I think that's a given. Almost everyone understands the importance of cognitive and effective skills. And hence, the why part has not been elaborated upon, not really needed. But all those that are attending the conference today or this webinar here will have to feel totally convinced about it. Until there is that passion, that clear understanding of the necessity of it, mere acceptance of it will not happen. Because I've always believed, in the 38 years of my civil service, I believe that mere understanding may not help. In order to drive it, you have to passionately agree with what is being said, understand the necessity of it very clearly, and then move it.
And the first finding itself clearly indicates a significant portion of students in top private schools were found to be inattentive to the task. Now, I had intuitively believed that that's the case. Having studied in some such schools, I know a large number of students are actually inattentive. That's a ground reality which we have to accept. The second one, and I am sure there's going to be a longer presentation later during the discussion today, it says students were seen to be less positive in their response about their school climate. So that's the perception of the students regarding their own schools. And these are good schools. These are not, so to say, sometimes we keep condemning the government schools for what they aren't, but these are so-called good schools. Then the third finding is even more alarming. Alarmingly high incidence of physical and verbal abuse among schoolmates. Now this, and the percentage is almost 50%. Now this is pretty shocking, but that's the state of affairs. Then it talks about a very high percentage of students report physical punishment. Now this is banned actually, but you have almost more than 28% cases, there is physical punishment. Though there is something wrong somewhere. And another one in every 5 students and 1 in every 10 teacher and 1 in every 17 principal were found to wish that they could leave for another school. So there is that lack of satisfaction with what they have in their hands. And that again is very important. If you're not easy with what you are and you're already looking out somewhere, how do you learn? I don't can. And they problem with the teachers. This is amazing. Now, if a child or a student is unable to share his problems with the teacher, then how are those problems going to be solved? Are we creating an environment where the student feels comfortable to interact with the teacher? The report, if it is 1/3 of the students aren't able to do it, is pretty disturbing. Then another disturbing outcome of this or the feature of this report is A large proportion of students report that their schoolmates damage school property. Now, some students do take pleasure in being destructive. Now, that can actually develop into a very destructive part of the nature of a child when he grows up. Now, I'm glad that these have been pointed out, but to me, more important in this report, probably could be slightly more elaborated, would have been the prescription part of it. What has happened is, it's a fact check on the ground. The next step is to understand the why of that happening. I am not very sure whether this report actually points towards the why of it. Because unless you understand the why of a problem, I think prescription will not come through, because that's the next step. How do you prescribe? There are recommendations in this book, but they are not so fleshed out. So my apprehension is, some of these recommendations will certainly be discussed, but will not be implemented because the why part has not been elaborated at length. Now, we have to understand, and probably that could come out in other reports, that what is the reason why children are unable to discuss with teachers their own problems. Why students are more prone to destroying public or school property. Why is it so? That actually is very critical, because unless you understand the why of an issue, I am not very sure you'll be able to find a solution to the problem. Solution can be, and I learned it again through the 38 years. When I was coal secretary, everyone thought that coal scans were a problem. And I was soon to point out, scans are merely a symptom of a problem that exists. The primary problem was coal. Why is there a shortage of coal? So on and so forth. You keep digging deep down and go to a level where you start finding solutions to those whys. So prescription will be determined on the basis of understanding of why of this problem. What this report does beautifully is to present the problems as they stand, some of which we were probably not aware, or some of which we never knew. But after having done that, we have to understand the cause of that problem. And the next step would be a prescription. Now, this again is very important, because unless you understand the why, you want to come up with a very doable prescription. Now, why I say doable? You know, in our country, and I have often said in the past, it's very easy to come up with ideas. You know, even during these Corona times, you walk down in a street, of course, with a mask on, and if you ask somebody, what is the solution to this problem? Almost everyone will have a solution. With solutions. Everyone has. In fact, there are too many solutions. But no one understands that for finding a solution to a problem in a democratic country like ours, it has to be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable, judicially tenable, and I've added another one. It has to be emotionally relatable. And let me explain this in the context of what is written in this report. Let us understand, I don't see much of a problem in political acceptability of the recommendations in this report, and probably in the future reports, because almost every politician would also appreciate the need for what this report is made out. So I don't think there's going to be a major problem, the political acceptability. I also feel that there's no serious problem with regard to social desirability. I think whatever has been recommended in this report, and probably it will be discussed later, and in future reports also, I am not very sure whether there will be reservation at the social. It is eminently desirable, whatever is being said here. Now, these two are not a problem. And even the technological feasibility also, I don't see much of a problem. I see a problem in its financial viability. When I say financial viability, we have to actually very seriously look at what is the additional financial requirement to implement the recommendations when they come. And I keep repeating, these recommendations should be based on understanding the why of a problem. What has been understood so far is the what of the problem. What is the issue? We have understood the why of it. But the problem of how will be determined on the basis of our understanding of why the problem exists. So there would be need of money. Is there that money available? Yes, education policy talks about 6% of GDP being allocated to education sector. This is nothing new. In fact, this was said by Dr. Kothari. I didn't see it, at least during my time, 6% coming to education. If anything, the actual budget allocation for school education in real terms came down. And I don't see government being able to. I mean, it's not that government would not want to. Every government probably would want to allocate money to education, but there are pressing needs. There are other pressing needs, and especially in the wake of what we're seeing in the past 1 year. Given the crisis that we are in, I'm not very sure whether the government will be able to allocate that money. So money is going to be an issue. So the recommendation should not merely come up with such a suggestion where you feel that the money should come. No, it's not should. You must account for the financial limitations, and probably have two levels of recommendation. One which do not require so much financial commitment, others that require financial commitment. In fact, I am looking at the national education policy also, a brilliant education policy, but I'm not very sure whether all of it can be implemented, for the simple reason that the money may not be there to back those recommendations. And until that happens, those recommendations will remain recommendations. Then we come to the fourth aspect, or the fifth aspect, the administrative doability. And this again is very critical. Now, if, say, for example, for bringing about a change in a school, counseling is required. Do we have such counselors? I'm not saying we can't have them. What I'm saying is we don't have them at this point in time. Are there sufficient number of counselors available to counsel the child into understanding the wrong that he's doing? No, he can't be given physical punishment to tell him, you do this, you do that. In fact, at that age, if you give physical punishment, he will respond. He will not accept what you're saying. He has to be counseled. And that's a slow process, time-consuming process, and you require experts. Do we have those experts? No, one thing is to recommend that this should be done. Of course, the recommendation itself should be based on understanding of the issue, understanding the why of issue. The other is making it happen on the ground. That's very critical. How do you make it happen? And hence, it is very important to understand the inherent limitations in making any recommendation happen. So when, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a child who is actually not feeling comfortable in the class, if a child wants to leave the school and go to some other schools because grass is always greener on the other side, if there are teachers who want to go on to the other side, go to some other school, how do you persuade them to start believing in the school that they are in, their commitment to the school? Now, these are very important aspects, and they won't happen just like that. A lot of work will need to be done. Do we have the human resource? If not, then the recommendation should also say, how do we have that? You know, going through the national education policy, which has some extremely wonderful provisions, I have not seen too much how in it. How do you do it? And the problem with governance today is not so much prescription or diagnosis, it is more of application, making it happen. So when such reports are prepared, I think a roadmap needs to be laid down very clearly on what needs to be done. That, of course, should come up, how it will be done, who will do it, by when it will be done. That's very important. You can't leave this to somebody else. If it is left to somebody else, it's such a beautiful report that it will find a place in a very beautiful almirah, in a beautiful secretary, and then not seen thereafter. I've seen many such reports as Secretary Government of India. They just are consigned to a nice place in an almirah and never looked at. They are only looked at future researchers who would like to refer to some report at some point in time. So it may make a lot of academic sense. But realistically speaking, ultimately the bottom line of every research should be, apart from academic excellence, it should be to make or change things on the ground, and hence it's important. I don't think there will be a major problem with judicial evidence that will be accepted, but there could be an issue with regard to emotional relatability. What is that emotional relatability? Emotional relatability is that the consumer, the persons who are going to be impacted by the recommendation, accept this to be done. Now, this again is not a very easy exercise. It's difficult. You may say what you're saying is right. Let's say, as an academician says, this should be done. But to make it happen, the stakeholders have to accept what you're saying. And some of the stakeholders are sitting in this webinar. I'm glad these officers are here. First, they will have to accept that this is the right thing. This is the need of the hour. But more than that, those students, those teachers, those principals will have to be convinced that this is the possible way forward. It emanates from the why part also. But then it is much broader, much deeper in the context of the stakeholders, not only accepting, but owning these recommendations. That's very important. Until they have that ownership. And that's where they should be able to relate emotionally to the recommendations that have been made. So in brief, what I would suggest is, this is a fabulous report in terms of determining what is the status on the ground, and it's pretty chilling in some cases. I felt it was intuitively, I could say this is the case. But now that gets validated through a scientific assessment. But how do you change that? And that is the key for me. It's not merely just a report. I'm sure there will be many such reports that would have been written in the past. But the real purpose of such reports should be to change things on the ground. I'm glad that first step has been taken today. This report will be revealed, and I hope it will be discussed. And I am also sure that the stakeholders that are participating in this will be able to accept these facts that exist on the ground, and then they will probably work out an action plan clearly outlining how to make it happen on the ground. To me, as a die-hard practitioner throughout my career, I've always believed the bottom line is making things happen on the ground. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I'll hold on for a while till the presentation is ready and probably take a few questions that you have. Thank you, Vijayanti, for inviting me here, and God bless you. Great effort, wonderful report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your kind words. I think your words have been like motivating, I think, a lot of people to take action on the ground. As I said, the study, this is just a starting, and the discussion series, instead of just releasing it as a report online and sending the link, we wanted to initiate the discussion series specifically because I think solution cannot be prescribed by one agency or organization. Solution has to be collectively evolved, as you said, keeping the ground reality in mind. And I hope that what you have flagged off so beautifully today, and with so much of kind and warm words and very meaningful and thoughtful, sage advice, I would say, are things that all the participants, the panelists, as well as the attendees there, and those who are watching from the YouTube actually take cognizance of, and then figure out means and solutions as to how to bring together these solutions for our country and our children and our teachers. Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking your time.